now have a point of view, India as a GCC capital, by Lalit Ahuja, who's joined us virtually or is about to join us. Lalit Ahuja is the co-founder and CEO, ANSR Inc. There he is. So it's over to you, Lalit, if you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you.
Hi, Lalit. This is Rakesh. Very good evening.
Hi, Rakesh. Good evening to all of you as well.
I don't know you can see me. I'm requesting the camera person if you can just move the camera this side.
I'm not able to see you, but I can hear you clearly. Now I can see you. Thank you.
Hi. Very good evening. Thanks for the time. I think we all are super excited in this room talking about a lot on GCC. And as you know, this forum is all about having practitioners coming together to deliberate and talk about what are those best practices and beyond, which is more next practices as we are talking about. In fact, we have a couple of sessions earlier. We also got Dr. Mukesh Aghi to talk about India-US strategic partnership and how the company should look at, as well as we also heard a session from Ravi talking about, how the organizations needs to look at the coexistence in terms of the ecosystem, etc. So I wanted to hear some perspectives from you on few areas, and you being one of the visionaries from the GCC's point of view, wanted to hear what's your view, India evolving as a GCC capital of the world, and as you know, the theme is also about the whole new world of GCC. So some thoughts from you in terms of...
So, I mean, in some ways, just setting a little bit of a context, I think the time has come for, GCCs to be designated as an industry in its own right, with almost 1.5% contribution to our GDP, and being an important pillar of the Viksit Bharat 2047 strategy, and potentially going up to 2.5% to 3% of India's GDP by 2047. There's clearly a lot of growth ahead. The GCC marketplace has been in the making for nearly 2 decades now, thanks to the early pioneers like companies like Target, Tesco, a whole lot of tech and product companies like Microsoft and Google. And in some ways, we are at an inflection point. This is some sort of an end of the beginning. The industry is matured to a point where we're going to see a much more rapid adoption of the industry, cutting across industry, size, location of domicility, and market segment lines. In many ways, India is the GCC capital of the world. We have more than 50% market share out of a total of, I guess, 3,200 odd GCCs, more than 1,700, whichever way we look at it, are in India. And increasingly, we're going to see the share only rise over a period of time. And I see 5 factors that are contributing to India becoming the GCC capital of the world. The first one relates to GCCs being the next frontier to outsourcing. It all began with outsourcing. Ultimately, it was about companies having a comfort level, having presence, having relationships, the ability to deal with different time zones and cultural nuances. So GCCs was only a natural progression from where the outsourcing industry left. I guess talent has been a big part of the entire story, and I'm looking at a 5-dimensional view of the talent, beginning with cultural adaptability, which is very, very important for the sustenance of the GCCs. You got to be enterprise talent. You got to be one like everybody else in the company. So how our talent fits in to the cultural framework of any organization is very critical. The second has to do with leadership expectations, because ultimately GCC talent from a career pathing perspective. The opportunities are going to be across the enterprise. So therefore, it's important for talent to meet the leadership expectations for any company. The domain and functional skills. So if you're supporting GCC for a particular industry, it's important that you have the domain and the functional skills. The fourth one relates to communication and stakeholder management. I think this is where India, compared to some of the other peer countries and competitors, has excelled in terms of English being widely spoken, and of course from a pedigree upbringing perspective, talent having impeccable capabilities in communication and managing stakeholders. And the last one is job-related skills, which obviously is a function of the level of education that exists. The next factor that is contributing to India becoming the GCC capital has to do with the government policies from the ease of doing business perspective. You can set up a GCC under the automatic route. It almost takes no effort. There is no government approval required to incorporate a legal entity and get some of the downstream regulatory approvals to operationalize a GCC. Tax incentive schemes like STPI and SCZ historically have played a huge role in creating the incentives for companies to explore the GCC model. Very reasonable compliance burden compared to some of the other peer group and competitor countries. The fact that rule of law prevails, there's no ambiguity in terms of the broader governance framework, also provides a lot of comfort to companies that are looking at establishing GCCs, and of course laws around IP protection, because a lot of work that GCCs do has to deal with either managing intellectual capital of companies or even creating intellectual capital. The next factor where India is obviously a big standout is the real estate and the infrastructure industries. GCCs are locations of global companies, and therefore it's important that we have abundant supply of high quality and safe grade A infrastructure from a real estate perspective, telecommunication, connectivity, the broader ecosystem, availability of talent, etc. So real estate infrastructure industry has played a big role and continues to grow with the GCC industry. And finally, the whole notion of ecosystem, because GCCs thrive in a very enriching environment where you have other ecosystem players, GCCs, the talent marketplace, tech and platform companies, service providers, R&D institutions, government agencies, etc. Thank you.
Thanks, Lalit, for that. All those pointers to really confirm that we are no far from being a GCC capital. Very, very helpful. I just wanted to get some thoughts from you in terms of how do you see with this kind of growth which is in front of us for the next 5 years, crossing $100 billion in terms of, and maybe the numbers could be very high, but I'm still keeping $100 billion, if I have to say, as an overall growth for the next 5 years. What are the kind of headwinds, tailwinds which you expect we should be ready with? So some thoughts from you on that.
Yeah. So I think in some ways this bus has left the station, right? I cannot think of too many headwinds, but I'll talk about it. But let's look at the tailwinds first. I think we are at an inflection point. So we're going to see a much more rapid adoption by the Forbes 2000. Companies that are not having a GCC now will obviously make a beeline, and there is going to be a much rapid proliferation of GCCs in the market segment. We'll see a whole lot of new markets opening out, new countries, new industries. mid-market segment, PE portfolio companies. So a lot of non-traditional market segments will adopt the GCC model because it's just so attractive. It comes together, fairly quickly. There's a lot of certainty and predictability about the outcomes, and the risks have been largely mitigated. I guess besides the large mid-market segment, almost like the global 100,000, adopting GCCs, and of course the vast private equity portfolio companies also benefiting from this model. The the biggest growth driver over the years is also going to be going beyond IT and ITES, engineering functions, design, so, non-traditional business areas that are going to be adopted, by enterprises in search for, high quality talent, and of course, getting the, traditional benefits like cost arbitrage. So I guess lots of tailwinds. The headwinds will relate to some of the geopolitical factors. I mean, we are obviously living in, times which are very, very uncertain because of a variety of geopolitical disturbances, across the globe. The biggest challenge, in addition to the geopolitical considerations, is also going to be ensuring there is continued availability of talent. We got to keep the talent food chain going from academic institutions to service providers to startups, and then of course, the GCCs. There is enough business from, a GCC perspective, but we need to ensure that there is high quality talent that will also adapt itself, equally rapidly to how the business is going to be changing as a result of rapid adoption of technology and factors like AI. Thank you.
Many thanks, Lalit, for those thoughts again. I mean, you really preferred to talk about tailwinds first and some headwinds as well. So I think that is helpful. It also gives a lot of excitement, encouragement to all of us sitting in the room that tailwinds are very, very much there, and we should be all feeling very happy about it. Quick question in terms of looking at this industry is becoming very matured and evolving. How do you see organizations globally and India really exploiting and leveraging the power of ecosystem and the external expertise? So some thoughts from you, Lalit.
Yeah, I mean, GCCs have traditionally thrived on this whole notion of ecosystem. Even if you're a Fortune 10 company, when you come to a location like India and set up a GCC, you are effectively a very lean machine, and there are huge reliances on all kinds of companies that comprise the ecosystem to grow, to mature, to thrive, to optimize, etc. And this ecosystem essentially are the service provider partners, the tech and platform companies, the infrastructure companies, other GCCs, and now a growing GCC service provider industry. So essentially, it's become a lot more easier, a lot more certain from an outcome perspective to come and establish a GCC thanks to the existence of the ecosystem. The other, active component from an ecosystem perspective are the startups that are bringing in a lot of innovation. There's a very active startup grown-up corridor, as we call the grown-ups being the GCC, where a lot of startup innovation is now being consumed by the GCC industry. And we'll see over a period of time, there's going to be a lot more partnership and collaboration between different constituents of the ecosystem that will ultimately lead to rapid maturation and evolution of the GCC industry.
Some comments on role of ANSR. How do you see, you have been a journey on this for years. So how do you see your role continuing in this space as an organization, Lalit?
So, we've been doing this now for 20 years, and, we've come to a point where we are setting up a GCC every week. So that's the rate at which we are scaling. I guess we're playing role across the entire spectrum of requirements, from continuing to pioneer the GCC as a concept. We believe the model continues to evolve and mature, and we are at a critical juncture where the next iteration or evolution is going to be GCC becoming the enterprise. Some of the traditional past avatars have been in some ways divisive. GCC or many of them have been more like outposts or subservient or back offices, and they're getting closer to becoming integral part of the organizations, almost becoming the second headquarters or part of the organization. The second is obviously creating opportunities for companies from a go-to-market and from a risk mitigation perspective, creating a plethora of service propositions that will help companies get more comfort in taking the leap in setting up the GCC. So as a GCC service provider, we're trying to become an important constituent of the maturing ecosystem to hasten up the evolution and maturation, and also accelerate the more and more companies setting up GCCs in India.
Really appreciate. Thank you, Lalit. I think if you have time, I'll just take any questions in the room. If anyone have any questions, I can take maybe quick question. If anybody, 2 quick questions. Yeah, there's a hand there at the back. Can we get the mic there, please? And also the camera can just post. Yeah. Yeah, just keep your question brief.
Yeah. Hi, Lalit. Atul from
Yeah,
Quintus
hi.
Global. Quick question, in terms of GCCs and their evolution, how do you see once they establish, they can go to the point where they start delivering to the business value and, really build the capability? Because initial days, you're still kind of, it takes at least 6 months to a year to kind of stabilize things. So what's been your experience? How much time? Yeah.
Yeah, historically, GCCs used to go through a 4-phase evolution. You are set up as an experimental platform, you optimize the operations, and then you grow and scale, go broader and deeper across the organization, and then innovate and transform. Much of that has changed in the last 5 years. And it's also due to the kind of work that is moving into a GCC now. A lot of net new roles are coming in where GCCs are demonstrating productivity no different from what you would get in the home locations, pretty much from the outset, because you are setting up a new team or a new capabilities. I mean, in some ways, GCCs represent a very broad, wide spectrum, right? There are companies that are setting up GCCs essentially to do transactional kind of work, and there are organizations that are reimagining and accelerating their transformation by leveraging the GCC. So a lot depends upon where you are on this spectrum in terms of how you evolve and how quickly you become relevant in the context of an organization. I would say we are almost a portfolio of about 150 companies. I can talk of at least 25, 30 more recent companies that have seen productivity and impact and capability development pretty much from the outset. I mean, it always takes people to understand the business context and to be contextually empowered to start delivering this whole notion of value that we use so much. But it comes right from the outset, in contrast to a journey or an evolution. So the more mature GCCs that are being set up are productive pretty much from the beginning.
Very
Great.
nice.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any quick comments from anybody? Any quick questions? Otherwise, I know in the interest of the time, we'll progress. Any hands in the room? Any questions here? Okay, no questions? Perfect. I think thank you, Lalit, for your time. It was really great to hear you. On behalf of the entire leadership team, which is sitting here, representing the GCC world, thank you for sharing your perspectives.
Thank you,
Have a good
Rakesh.
evening.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone. Thanks for having me. Thank you.